You react emotionally. People control you. Not sometimes. Not accidentally. Always. The moment you explain how you feel, you lose leverage. The moment you react, you reveal weakness. Emotional people are predictable, easy to provoke, easy to manipulate. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago, and he knew something most people still refuse to accept. Power never belongs to the reactive. Power begins with self-mastery, not thrones. In 1513, Niccolò Machiavelli sat in exile, stripped of his position, barred from Florence's political halls. He had nothing, no army, no wealth, no title. Yet he produced The Prince, a work that would influence rulers for 5 centuries. How? Because he understood something that most people with actual power never grasp. Machiavelli observed that those who master themselves command greater influence than those who merely command armies. He watched rulers with vast resources fall to enemies with fewer soldiers, but better self-control. He saw princes with inherited power lose everything because one emotional outburst alienated crucial allies. He documented how a single moment of visible fear could embolden rebels and collapse kingdoms. His core insight: emotional reactions are a form of servitude. When you react, you've handed control of your internal state to external circumstances. Your mood becomes a puppet, and anyone who knows the strings can make you dance. The question that haunted his writings echoes today. Are you the architect of your mind, or merely a tenant in a house built by emotions? Most people never ask this question. They live entire lives as passengers in their own consciousness, reacting automatically to whatever stimulus appears, never recognizing they have a choice. They believe their emotions simply happen to them, like weather, uncontrollable, inevitable, something to endure or express, but never to master. Consider what happens in the theater of your consciousness when someone dismisses you in a meeting. Your idea gets shot down, your contribution ignored. Your carefully prepared presentation receives lukewarm feedback at best. In that moment, something ignites. Your chest tightens. Heat rises to your face. Your thoughts begin their familiar spiral. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is the ancient machinery of survival responding to perceived threat. Your ancestors faced actual threats. Predators, rival tribes. Exile from the group meant death. For them, social rejection was literally life-threatening. Get cast out from the tribe in the Paleolithic era, and you don't survive the winter. Your brain still carries this programming. But here's Machiavelli's crucial insight. What once protected us in the wilderness now imprisons us in modern existence. 10,000 years ago, an immediate threat required an immediate reaction. A predator in the grass, a rival tribe approaching, a cliff edge ahead in darkness. The faster you reacted, the longer you survived. Hesitation meant death. Your brain developed this hair-trigger response system because it worked. Today, the threats have changed, but the response hasn't. A critical email doesn't require the same survival response as a charging lion. A colleague's dismissive tone isn't actually a threat to your existence. Your presentation receiving criticism won't kill you. A friend not responding to your text for 3 hours doesn't mean imminent death. Yet your body activates the same ancient machinery. Elevated heart rate, tunnel vision, fight-or-flight chemistry flooding your system. The result? The reactions that once saved lives now destroy careers, relationships, and inner peace in a single afternoon. You send an angry email you can't unsend. You say something in heated argument you can never take back. You make a decision driven by fear that closes doors you'll wish remained open. All because your Paleolithic brain responded to a modern problem with prehistoric solutions. Machiavelli didn't have access to neuroscience, but he would have recognized immediately what modern research confirms. Deep within your brain exists a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your emotional alarm system, your personal threat detector, constantly scanning your environment for danger. Here's the critical sequence. When stimulation arrives, a sharp word, an unexpected loss, a sudden opportunity, praise, or criticism, signals rush first to this primitive region before reaching your rational prefrontal cortex. The amygdala processes this information in approximately 12 milliseconds. 12 milliseconds. That's roughly 10 times faster than the blink of an eye. Your rational brain, the prefrontal cortex that handles complex thinking, planning, and strategic decision-making, takes several hundred milliseconds to engage. By the time your rational mind shows up to the party, your emotional brain has already sent out invitations, decorated the venue, and started the music. This is why you feel before you think, react before you reason. This biological reality explains why empires fall and why individuals sabotage their own success with astonishing regularity. The emotional response arrives first, fast and overwhelming, while logic follows behind like a scholar chasing a runaway horse, shouting advice that arrives too late to matter. But here's what changes everything. This gap between emotional activation and conscious awareness, though measured in mere milliseconds, can be expanded through practice. You can train yourself to notice the gap, to inhabit that space, to make it wider. This is not metaphysical speculation. This is documented neuroscience. Regular meditation practice, for instance, literally thickens the prefrontal cortex and strengthens the connections between it and the amygdala. Let's make this concrete. Imagine walking through a city at dusk. The streets are emptying. You're alone on the sidewalk, thinking about your day. Suddenly, a large dog lunges toward you from an alley, barking aggressively. Its teeth are visible. It's moving fast. You don't pause to analyze the breed. You don't assess the statistical probability of dog attacks in this neighborhood. You don't consider your philosophical stance on animal behavior, or recall articles you've read about canine psychology. Your body simply moves. You step back. Your arms rise instinctively. Your heart accelerates from 60 to 120 beats per minute in 2 seconds. Adrenaline floods your system. Fear has already executed its complete program before your conscious mind forms the thought, "That's a dog." This automatic response kept your ancestors alive. The ones who stopped to analyze dog behavior didn't survive to become your ancestors. The ones who jumped first and asked questions later did. You inherited their nervous system. This same system activates when your message goes unanswered for 3 hours, when your presentation receives lukewarm feedback, when your carefully constructed plans encounter resistance, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when your ideas get dismissed in a meeting, when your partner uses that particular tone of voice. The trigger changes, but the response remains primitive. Threat detected, initiate defensive protocols. The 2 catastrophic strategies. When powerful emotions arise, most people default to one of 2 strategies. Neither works. Both cause damage, yet people repeat them daily because they've never learned an alternative. Strategy 1. Explosion. The explosive strategy means immediate reaction. The emotion arises and you become its instrument. Your boss criticizes your project in a team meeting. Anger surges. You defend yourself aggressively. Your voice rises. You point out your boss's past mistakes. You make it about winning rather than learning. Your face flushes. Everyone in the room becomes uncomfortable. 5 minutes of emotional reaction damage months of relationship building. Later, when the anger subsides and you're alone with your thoughts, you recognize the damage. You see how you appeared to others. You understand how you could have responded differently, but by then it's too late. The words are out. The impression is made. The relationship is strained. You've handed your boss evidence that you can't handle criticism professionally. Strategy 2. Suppression. The suppressive strategy appears more professional on the surface but is equally destructive, just slower. Same scenario. Your boss criticizes your project in a meeting. Anger surges. Same intensity, same chemistry flooding your system. But this time you smile and nod. You say, "Thank you for the feedback," while your jaw clenches tight enough to crack teeth. You push the anger down, telling yourself to be professional. Be the bigger person, don't react. But the emotion doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It festers. That afternoon you snap at a colleague over something trivial. That evening you're irritable with your partner. You can't focus on your work. You replay the meeting in your mind, thinking of perfect responses you should have given. 3 days later, you're still thinking about it. The emotion found outlets, just not conscious, chosen ones. Think of suppression like holding a beach ball underwater at a pool. It requires constant effort. Your arms tire. Your attention is consumed by the effort of keeping it down. You can't do anything else effectively because you're using so much energy to maintain the suppression. And eventually, inevitably, one of two things happens. Either your arms tire and the ball explodes upward with greater force than if you'd simply let it float, or you get so tired that you switch to explosion. A seemingly inexplicable outburst over something minor. This is why people who pride themselves on controlling their emotions often experience sudden, dramatic outbursts that seem to come from nowhere. Their partner asks a simple question, and they explode. A minor traffic inconvenience triggers rage. The pressure built while they suppressed and suppressed until the system failed catastrophically. The third way, observation without identification. If explosion fails and suppression fails, what works? The alternative requires understanding a subtle distinction that changes everything. When anger arises, the untrained mind immediately fuses with it. I am angry. This identification transforms you into the emotion itself. The emotion becomes your identity in that moment. You become anger wearing your face. But watch carefully. Observe what's actually happening. The emotion is not you. It's a phenomenon occurring within you. It's a weather pattern moving through the vast sky of your consciousness. You are not the storm. You are the space in which the storm appears. This shift in perspective, from participant to witness, creates the gap where freedom lives. Viktor Frankl discovered this truth in the most extreme laboratory imaginable. Imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, stripped of everything, family, possessions, identity, dignity, even his name replaced with a number tattooed on his arm. He observed that one thing remained that his captors could never take: his freedom to choose his response to circumstances. He watched fellow prisoners in identical circumstances respond completely differently. Some collapsed into despair. Others maintained dignity, and even found ways to help others despite having nothing themselves. Same situation, different interpretations, different responses. He realized, between what happens to you and how you respond lies a space, and in that space resides your freedom to choose. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as the foundation of all strategic thinking. The reactive person is predictable. If you know what triggers them, you can manipulate them effortlessly. Press this button, get that reaction. Every time, they become a machine you can operate. Want them angry? Say this. Want them defensive? Point out that. Want them compliant? Threaten this. They've handed you the instruction manual for operating them. The person who can pause, observe, and then choose their response, they've multiplied their power 1,000-fold. They've become unpredictable, strategic. You press the anger button and they respond with calm curiosity. You threaten and they respond with genuine questions. You insult and they respond with unaffected focus on the issue at hand. They're no longer a machine with predictable outputs. They're a conscious agent making strategic choices. Here's a real scenario. You're in a quarterly review meeting. You've prepared thoroughly. You're presenting results from a project you've led for 6 months. Midway through, a colleague interrupts. I have concerns about the methodology here. This data seems cherry-picked to support a predetermined conclusion. The accusation hangs in the air. Everyone's watching. Your face flushes. Multiple emotions hit. Simultaneously, anger at the accusation, embarrassment at the public challenge, fear that others will believe this, resentment that months of work are being dismissed. Your mind immediately generates a defensive response. That's completely unfair. You're questioning my integrity, but you've been practicing observation. So instead of speaking immediately, you pause. 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. In those 3 seconds, you notice the emotion without becoming it. You notice the heat in your face, the tightness in your chest, the urge to defend. You observe these as phenomena, not as directives you must obey. Then you choose your response strategically. That's an important concern. Walk me through specifically which data points you're questioning, and I'll explain the selection criteria. Your voice is calm, your body language is open. You've transformed a confrontation into a conversation. Your colleague either has legitimate concerns you can address, or they're fishing and will now have to provide specifics they don't have. Either way, you've maintained credibility. The anger you felt was data. It told you this matters. This requires a response. But you chose the form of that response. The emotion didn't control you. You used the emotion's energy strategically. Let's make this concrete and immediately applicable. Right now, this moment, try this experiment. Notice whatever you're feeling. Perhaps curiosity about where this discussion leads. Perhaps skepticism about whether 500-year-old philosophy applies to your modern problems. Perhaps impatience, wanting to reach the actionable advice. Perhaps boredom, perhaps excitement, perhaps resistance. Whatever arises, simply observe it. Don't judge it as good or bad. Don't try to change it or amplify it. Don't tell yourself you should feel differently. Simply notice it is there. Notice where you feel it in your body. Is there tension anywhere? Openness, heaviness, lightness? Just observe. In this simple act of observation, you've already begun to break the automatic chain between stimulus and response. You've inserted awareness between the trigger and your reaction. This gap, small as it seems, is where your power lives. This awareness practice operates on a principle that seems almost magical, but is actually quite mechanical. Emotions feed on attention of a particular kind, the kind that identifies with them, argues with them, justifies them, or tries to suppress them. I shouldn't feel this way. This feeling is wrong. I need to get rid of this. All of these responses feed the emotion, give it energy, make it grow stronger. But pure observation starves emotions of this reactive energy. Watch anger without becoming it, without judging it, without fighting it. And within 30 to 60 seconds, you notice something remarkable. The anger begins to lose intensity. Not because you fought it, not because you suppressed it, but because you stopped fueling it with identification and resistance. But observation alone isn't enough. You must understand what you're observing. Here's a fundamental truth. Every emotion begins with a thought, though the thought may move so quickly you barely notice it. Someone doesn't respond to your message. That's the event, neutral, just data. But watch what happens next. The thought flashes, usually beneath conscious awareness. They don't value me. This thought, this interpretation, generates the emotion of hurt. Then another thought. They're probably talking to someone more interesting. More hurt, plus a touch of jealousy. Then, this always happens. I'm always the one who cares more. Now you've added hurt, jealousy, and a sense of pattern that may or may not exist. But notice what actually happened. The situation was simple. A message went unanswered. Everything else, the story about not being valued, the comparative narrative about other people being more interesting, the catastrophic generalization that this always happens, the projection into a future of loneliness. Your mind created all of this. The situation was neutral. Your interpretation made it painful. Here's where Machiavelli's realism becomes crucial. He insisted on seeing things as they are, not as we wish them to be or fear them to be. Most emotional suffering comes not from reality, but from the stories we tell about reality. Your mind is a storytelling machine, constantly weaving narratives about what events mean, what they say about you, what they predict about the future. Most of these stories are fiction, compelling fiction, but fiction nonetheless. The person didn't respond because they're in back-to-back meetings, their phone died, they're dealing with a family crisis. They saw your message and intended to respond thoughtfully later but forgot. They're overwhelmed and haven't checked messages today. They're struggling with depression and barely functioning. 1,000 explanations exist that have nothing to do with how they value you. But your mind chose one story, the most painful one, and ran with it. Why? Because your brain has what psychologists call a negativity bias. It's wired to spot threats, not opportunities. This kept your ancestors alive. Better to assume the rustling in the grass is a predator and be wrong 1,000 times than assume it's the wind once and get eaten. But in modern life, this bias creates unnecessary suffering. Your friend texts, "Hey, I need to cancel our dinner tonight. Sorry." That's the complete message. Now watch your mind generate interpretations. They don't value our friendship. They found something better to do. They're flaky and unreliable. This is disrespectful. I'm always the one who makes effort. Each interpretation generates an emotion. Hurt, anger, resentment, self-pity. But what's the actual data? They need to cancel. That's it. Everything else is your mind's fictional addition. Now generate 5 alternative interpretations. They're sick. They have a work emergency. Their kid is having a crisis. They're struggling with anxiety and can't face socializing today. Their car broke down and they're embarrassed to explain. Each of these explanations is as valid as your initial interpretation. Actually more valid because they're based on common realities rather than assumed slights. Notice what happens to your emotion when you genuinely consider these alternatives. The hurt loosens. The anger dissipates. Not because you've convinced yourself of something false, but because you've recognized that your initial interpretation was never truth. It was one possibility among many. Here are 4 specific, immediately applicable techniques. Technique 1. The 3-second pause. When strong emotion surges before speaking or acting, pause for exactly 3 seconds. Count them deliberately. 1, 2, 3. This creates space between impulse and action. In conversation, this transforms you from reactive to strategic. Someone criticizes you. Anger. Flashes. Pause. Notice the anger, feel it in your body, the heat, the tension, the urge to defend. Then choose. Does immediate defense serve your interests here? Or would asking a clarifying question serve you better? Would acknowledging the valid points while addressing the invalid ones show strength? The pause gives you options. Reaction gives you none. Technique 2. Question. Your interpretation. When emotion arises, ask yourself, what else could this mean? Generate at least 5 alternative interpretations. Don't try to convince yourself of the most positive one. Just recognize that your first interpretation is not truth. It's one possibility among many. This single question loosens the grip of reactive emotion more effectively than any suppression technique. Your colleague doesn't greet you in the hallway. First interpretation, they're angry at me. Alternatives, they're distracted by a problem. They didn't see you. They're late for a meeting. They're stressed about a presentation. They're dealing with personal issues. Their mind was elsewhere. The multiplication of explanations doesn't require you to believe any particular one. It just breaks the certainty that created the emotional reaction. Technique 3. Sit with discomfort. You have an important presentation tomorrow. Anxiety arises. Your instinct is to distract yourself. Scroll social media, watch videos, busy yourself with minor tasks, anything to avoid the feeling. Instead, try this. Sit quietly for 3 minutes. Set a timer. Notice exactly where you feel the anxiety in your body. Chest tightness, stomach flutter, tension in shoulders, rapid heartbeat. Observe these sensations with curiosity, as if you're a scientist studying interesting data. Don't try to eliminate the sensations. Don't tell yourself they shouldn't be there. Simply observe them. Rate their intensity from 1 to 10. Notice if they move or change. Within 2 to 3 minutes of pure observation, something remarkable happens. The intensity diminishes significantly. The sensations are just sensations, data, not danger. Technique 4. Strategic response selection. After observation and questioning interpretation, ask, what response serves my long-term interests? Not what feels good immediately, not what proves you're right, not what punishes the other person. What serves your actual goals? Someone insults you in a group setting. Anger surges. You observe it. You question your interpretation. Maybe they're having a terrible day and lashing out generally, not personally at you. Now choose. Does escalating serve your long-term interests? Does responding with equal hostility help? Or does responding with calm, unaffected competence serve you better? Does addressing it directly but privately later show more strength? Does letting it pass because this person's opinion actually doesn't matter demonstrate confidence? The emotion provides valuable data. It tells you this situation requires a response. But you choose the form of that response based on strategy, not impulse. The emotion becomes your advisor, not your master. Here's a fundamental truth that many people resist. You are responsible for your emotional state. This statement triggers defensiveness immediately. So let's be precise about what it means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you're to blame when difficult emotions arise. You cannot control that first flash of emotion. That's automatic, biological, hardwired. Someone insults you and anger flashes. That's not your fault. That's your nervous system doing what it evolved to do. You're not responsible for the weather patterns that move through your consciousness, but you are responsible for what you do with those emotions. You control whether you observe them or identify with them. You control whether you act on them or choose your response strategically. You control whether you feed them with reactive attention or starve them with simple observation. This distinction matters enormously. The person who believes emotions are caused by external circumstances remains forever at their mercy. She made me angry. This situation is depressing. They ruined my day. This language reveals the mindset. External events have total power over your internal state. You're a passive victim of whatever happens. If circumstances are bad, you feel bad. If people are difficult, you suffer. You've handed all power to things outside your control. The person who recognizes that emotions are generated by their interpretations of circumstances reclaims their power. Same event, different interpretation, different emotion. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means recognizing where your power actually lives, not in controlling external events, but in choosing how you interpret and respond to them. Here's your challenge. For the next 30 days, practice observation. Every time strong emotion arises, anger, anxiety, hurt, fear, jealousy, shame, pause for 3 seconds before responding. Use that pause to notice the emotion. Notice where you feel it physically. Notice the thoughts generating it. Then choose your response rather than defaulting to your habitual reaction. 30 days. You'll encounter approximately 90 emotional triggers per day. That's 3 per waking hour, a conservative estimate. 2,700 opportunities to practice. 2,700 repetitions to rewire patterns that took decades to form. This is not a large investment compared to the years these patterns have been operating, but it's enough to begin experiencing real change. You will resist this practice. Your mind will generate compelling reasons why now is not the time, why your situation is special, why this approach might work for others but not for your unique circumstances, why you need to deal with this urgent crisis first, why you'll start next week when things calm down, though things never calm down, do they? This resistance is not evidence that the practice is wrong for you. It's evidence that your current patterns sense the threat to their dominance and are attempting to maintain control. Your reactive patterns are not stupid. They know that consistent practice will end their reign, so they'll do everything possible to prevent you from starting or continuing. Notice this resistance. Observe it with the same curiosity you're learning to bring to all internal experiences. Then practice anyway. One final clarification. The goal is not to become emotionless. Some people hear emotional mastery and imagine a cold, robotic existence. That's not mastery. That's emotional death. Emotions give life color, meaning, richness, depth. Without them, you're not more effective. You're less human. Joy, love, excitement, even appropriate sadness and anger. These are what make life worth living. The goal is experiencing the full range of human emotion while maintaining the clarity and agency to respond effectively, to love deeply without becoming dependent, to feel anger without being controlled by it, to experience fear without being paralyzed, to know sadness without drowning in it, to feel joy without losing yourself in it and crashing when it fades. This is the mature human position, depth of feeling combined with effectiveness of action. This is what Machiavelli would recognize as virtue in its highest form, the capacity to remain yourself, clear and strategic, regardless of circumstances. Not despite emotions but with them, not around them but through them, not suppressing them but transforming your relationship with them. Begin now. Everything discussed here works, but it works only if you work it. Understanding changes nothing. Insight without application is just entertainment. Only practice transforms. So take what resonates from this discussion and begin applying it today. Not tomorrow when you feel ready. Not next week when things settle down. Today, in the next situation that triggers emotion. Observe the emotion without becoming it. Question your interpretation. Feel the physical sensations without trying to eliminate them. Choose your response based on your long-term interests, not immediate impulse. Then observe the result. Did that response serve you better than your habitual reaction would have? What did you learn? What will you do differently next time? This loop, practice, observe, adjust, practice again, is how mastery of anything develops. How you learned to walk, falling hundreds of times before finding balance. How you learned to read, struggling with letters before they became words, words before they became meaning. How you learned any complex skill you now perform automatically. This is no different. Machiavelli wrote for those who wanted power in the real world, not for dreamers content with beautiful theories that never touch practical reality. This discussion is offered in the same spirit. If you want emotional mastery, You must practice. If you practice consistently, you will develop capacity. If you develop capacity, your life will change. The connection between practice and result is reliable, documented, observable. The only variable is whether you will commit to consistent practice despite the discomfort, the setbacks, the moments of doubt that will absolutely come. The invitation stands. Will you remain enslaved to emotional patterns you never consciously chose? Or will you claim mastery over your own mind? Will you let every external circumstance determine your internal state? Or will you develop the sovereignty that allows you to remain centered regardless of what life presents? The choice is yours. It has always been yours. You simply may not have recognized that you had the power to choose. Now you know. Now comes the only question that matters. What will you do with that knowledge? Begin today, this moment. The next time emotion surges, pause and observe. Feel it fully without becoming it. Choose your response strategically. This simple practice, repeated consistently, is the foundation of transformation. Everything else is commentary. The power is in the practice. And the practice begins now. If this discussion resonated with you, if you found value in this approach, take a moment to express that. Leave a comment, even anonymous if you prefer, sharing your thoughts or your commitment to practice. Subscribe to continue this conversation, to be reminded of these principles, to join a community of others pursuing mastery rather than accepting default patterns. This is not about me gaining subscribers. This is about you surrounding yourself with reminders and reinforcement for the most important work you can do. The work of becoming the master of your own mind. The path is clear. The practice is simple. The results are transformational. What remains is only your decision. Will you walk this path or merely admire it from a distance? Machiavelli would say that all the wisdom in the world means nothing without application. So apply it, practice it, transform through it. Your future self, calmer, clearer, more effective, more free, is waiting for you to take the first step. That step is observation. Begin now.